I love the examples of Jimmy Carter, who, when he left the presidency, he did far more with Habitat for Humanity, or Clinton with the Clinton Foundation and what he did in Africa. Both of them did arguably a great deal more and created a lot more meaning and value in the world. And we're really truly expressing the best of what the third act is about, which is giving back, being an elder, creating value in the world and for others.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, the podcast where we celebrate aging with vibrance and we defy the stereotypes of what it means to age. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, a psychotherapist of more than 30 years, here to introduce you to my off-the-mainstream guests who will energize and inspire you. My hope is to create optimism about getting older and help you cultivate zest and joy in this season of your life. And I love to hear feedback from you, my listeners. Please drop me a line at zestfulaging@gmail.com. I read every single comment. And to find out more about this podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. Well, today we're going to speak with my favorite kind of zestful ager, one who has had multiple jobs and adventures that are off the mainstream, and who offers us a new way to think about our own aging. And I've never had a theme park designer on the show before. Wayne Lair is a vibrant and curious 73-year-old who has lived an inspiring and eclectic life, including pioneering the growing of wheatgrass and spirulina, studying Oriental medicine, and practicing silence for 5 months. Wayne has also produced and directed 3D IMAX films, and he is a master yoga and meditation teacher who has taught tens of thousands and trained hundreds to teach. And he's currently teaching at the USC School of Gerontology. And he's just out with this new book we're going to talk about called The Art of Conscious Aging, an operating manual for an extraordinary third act. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. It's great to be here.
We're going to have a fun conversation. I am so fascinated by your job history, and we're going to get into all the aging stuff, but I really want to know, how does one find themselves in a position where they are designing theme parks? How do you find yourself there?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm actually asked it quite often because there is not a track in school or college for that.
Right.
In my mid-30s, I went back to school to become a filmmaker. And after leaving film school, I got hired by a company that was set to do. I sort of specialized in special effects in film school. I was very interested in watching slow motion water and watching fire, and then and I got into. It was the very, very beginning of the computer graphics stage, and computer graphics hadn't really been taken off at that point. So my first job out of film school was producing a Dan Rather's CBS Evening News graphic package, which included animation and computer graphics and an 80-piece CBS orchestra and that whole thing. And soon thereafter, I got a job. A company hired me to write a piece on how to do 3D because they were trying to get a job making a 3D film for a World's Fair in South Korea. And so I knew nothing about it, but I said, yes, I can do that. And I wrote this thing on it. And then they said, well, can you do this? And can you do that? And next thing you knew, I was the owner of the company, decided I was the go-to guy for everything creative in the company. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't making films at that point, but I was designing. I designed actually 6 pavilions for one World's Fair, and I'd been an artist as a teenager, and I painted and just generally have always been, a creative person.
Mhm.
And so I just sort of backed my way into doing this. And what happened was the World's Fair I designed. The main pavilion that I ended up being one of the co-designers of included a 3D IMAX film,
Oh, wow.
and and as a result of having written the paper on it, I became the director of it, and then I wrote this thing, and then computer graphics was just beginning, so we were pioneering, how to animate a human, and all of this stuff was happening at early stages, and people had ping pong balls glued to their body as the points of uh, ingress for the computer to establish their movements. And so
Oh,
I was in at the beginning of that whole thing, and one thing led to another, and then I designed the 94th floor of the Hancock Building in Chicago, which became a destination, uh, uh, whatever an event, and
okay.
and one thing led to another, and then I did theme parks and museums and World's Fairs for the next 12, 15 years.
It occurs to me as you're talking about your past, um, you must have had an orientation to life where you're saying yes. Because you talked about, well, I didn't really know what I was doing, but they asked me, so I figured it out. Do you think that's fair to say that throughout your life you've been open to doing opportunities that you may or may not have had a degree in?
Yeah, well, I actually, having gone to college at multiple colleges, actually still have no degree.
Oh,
so, so I went to City College. Oh, actually, I do. I have an AA, and but I each school I sort of left. I was an art major, and then I was a physics major, and then I went to film school, and I left the last semester before graduating film school because I got this opportunity to direct Dan Rather, and
hmm.
so. But I've always. I don't know that I've ever had super high esteem about anything except for my creativity. I've always completely loved everything I've done creatively. I never have
Mhm.
seen any of it as flawed. I saw myself as uniquely talented painter, sculptor, designer, because I did only what it was that pleased me. And when I was done with it,
Mhm.
I saw it as amazing, which I think all really truly good artists kind of have that in common, which is as long as you do you,
Mhm.
then when it's done, you're the best you in the world. And so even though other people can look at my paintings and they go, well, they're a little out of focus. I go, yeah, but that's a different way to see the universe. And, if you kind of did this and did that, then you'd see that was a way to look into the spiritual kingdoms. And I have this whole thing about it because that's what it is to me. So, yeah, I think I've always said yes, but it was because I've never followed any specific track. One thing's, yeah. So
So
yes,
you're
one
not
thing.
looking for approval. You are, I mean, that's something that many of us struggle with. And I'm actually going to interview a guest who just wrote a book about people pleasing and how it really gets in the way, and how in the third act, people have an opportunity to say, I'm not doing that anymore. But it doesn't sound like that's ever been an obstacle for you. You've been very clear and sort of synced in with what makes you feel satisfied.
Yeah, I've always I took up sculpting at 52 years old, and I was instantaneously great at it. Like nothing I've ever done. I was born.
Okay.
I just knew how to use a hammer and chisel. I
Huh.
knew how to use a pneumatic drill. I knew how to use it all, and who knows where that comes from. But yeah, I've always just followed an itch,
Mhm.
including doing, like you said, I was in silence once for multiple months, and people say,
Mhm.
well, why did you do that? I said, well, I got an itch, and I just thought about kind of be a cool thing to do, and then it was just hard to stop and start
Mm.
talking again. So I've always followed my own thing, and it's kind of how I got to this place where I wrote the book. I just sort of backed into one more thing that interested me.
So talk about why the art of conscious aging is different, because we both know, and you're teaching at USC, you know this, there's a lot of books on aging. Tell me why yours really stands out.
Well, I think the truly unique thing about mine that I believe in, that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, is, um, it had been called, I was earlier on calling it an operating manual. Now I'm calling it a guide to happiness, health, and purpose in one's third act. I just saw what happened was, you know, I talk about this in the book, that life happens, in my estimation, it happens in three acts. And the first act, is basically from 0 to 20, where we're exploring, we're finding out who we are, we're finding out how the universe around us works. We're finding out good and bad, we're finding out pain and pleasure. And, we're basically just, for that period of time, we have the freedom to follow our own inner muse and interests. And then the second act comes along, and a lot of people, have this transition called the identity crisis between the first and second act, where, the first act is really being about dependency, and the second act is about independence. And in the second act, we have tons of role models. You want to become rich, there's Richard Branson. You want to become famous. There's the Kardashians. You want to make a contribution somewhere else in the world. There's a lot of role models out there. And during the second act, what we do is we accumulate knowledge, we acquire, we succeed, we compete. We basically step into the world and become our own person. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really a time of me and mine. And mine
Mm-hmm.
includes my family, and my job. But it's really the my period. And as I said, it's really a time of independence. And
Mm-hmm.
and basically that goes for most of us, from 20 to about mid 50s or 60. Most people, it's right around 60 where it really changes. And so what happens when you come and a lot of people give up pursuing what they're really passionate about during that time, because it's about earning a living, it's about
Mm-hmm.
providing for your family, it's about building a business, or owning a home, or whatever it is. It's all in the world sort of things. And a lot of times, to accomplish that, people feel like they have to compromise their dreams, or they have to give up what they want, or like, you're not going to make money at that, your parents tell you when you go to school, because you want to become a poet or a historian. And
And it's a
so,
really hard time too. We know about middle age being incredibly stressful for many reasons we don't need to go into here, but people are busy, they're tired, they're stressed, they're time starved, all of
right.
that.
Well, they've basically been inducted into a life of responsibilities and commitments, and things, some of which they're happily doing, and many of which are just the byproduct of having to provide for their family, and
Mhm.
many of which they only got inadvertently. They didn't actually choose those things, and then a lot of people end up sort of resentful about it, or settling for it, or
Mhm.
or worst of all, and this is not uncommon, the victim of it. Oh
Mhm.
my God, I'm working all the time. I have no free time for
Mhm.
myself. The kids always got me to do this. I always need to do. And so we
Mhm.
get in that whole lifestyle. So basically, we get to a place in our mid 50s, early 60s, where all of the things that we've been doing, the acquiring, the accumulating, the competing, we just can't do it at the same level, and we don't want to. And we start wondering, is this all there is? Have I created any value or meaning in the world? And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, we're also, people come along to take our jobs that are 25 years younger than us, so we can't compete at the same level. Our bodies finally start to break down. And, for example, for myself, I was absolutely bulletproof. I literally did not go to a doctor for 25 years.
Oh,
And,
wow.
because I had learned about eating healthy, and I'd been, an exercise person all along, and many things that I talk about that a lot of people don't really discover until they get older. I started doing that in my late teens, early 20s, just because it interested me. So all of a sudden, we're at a place in our life where, and here's the biggest deal, is that there's really no role models for a third act. So we get to this place where everything we've been doing is not working at the same level, and we may be downsized out of our job, or we may choose to retire. Our kids leave the house and we have an empty nest. So if it's a woman, or even a man or a woman in that case, all of a sudden it's like, the woman may have graduated college and had a degree, but she can't put it on her resume because there is no resume. She's got 30 years of non-working, or working at a job less than her training level or college degree level. And so we're left facing, how do I make this transition? And what is this transition? Because there's no role models to say what it is.
So it's such a profound adjustment.
Huge.
Okay.
And I believe that, so one of the things I've identified that really was the crux of what brought me to write the book was that I basically got to 60 and my body started having issues, nothing major, but lots of little things, and knee replacement, and, just the stuff that happens with an aging body, even one that's been well taken care of. And I'm looking at, I don't have enough money to retire. And so a lot of the issues that came up really hit me in the face. And I was also experiencing this sort of low-grade depression. And I really didn't know what it was. And I'd been sort of, quote unquote, melancholic at different times in my life. And that's sort of what it felt like. And I went to see a therapist, and the therapist specialized in gerontological psychology. And he wasn't really very helpful. And so I really did a lot of exploration. And what I began to see was that I was really suffering from this identity crisis, that I was not, I was no longer this person that was jumping from thing to thing anymore, and, getting to a place where I got mastery and then getting another itch and moving on. All of a sudden I was like worried about, well, I don't have enough money in the bank to ever retire. And, you need at least X amount in the bank, when you hit 60, if you're going to, and now all of a sudden we have 40 more years.
That's right. Hi, Zesties. Well, we all know that exercise is really important, especially as we age. Some say it's the most important thing you can do to stay healthy. But many of us find that it's really easy to start an exercise routine, but it's hard to keep it up. That's why we see so many exercise bikes and machines being used as clothes hangers come March. Am I the only one who has bought a gym membership that turned out to be a total waste of money? At this point in life, I want to do things that are good for me, but also fun. You'll never find me at a class called boot camp because life is hard enough. And that is why I love my rebounder. What is a rebounder? Well, it's a mini trampoline that has so many health benefits, it's kind of crazy. It turns out that gently jumping up and down provides excellent benefits to our whole body. It helps clear lymphatic drainage, which is basically toxic waste in our bodies. And get this, NASA uses it to help their astronauts reacclimate when they've been up in space. And I'm not even going to go into the improvements in complexion and mood. Let's just say it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're jumping to your favorite music. It's like your own dance party. But if you're interested in a rebounder, please take my advice. Don't buy a cheap one. They can actually be dangerous. I would recommend the one I have, which is a NEEDAK rebounder. It's NEEDAK, and mine's going on about 20 years old. I use it with light weights, and I've actually used it to train for the senior tennis games, as well as my Camino walk in Spain. And it's also great to use in upstate New York in the winter when the weather is awful, which is pretty often. So right now you can get a free rebounder cover at NEDAC if you use the coupon code ZESTFUL. So again, NEDAC, NEEDAK. And if you have any questions, check out my YouTube demo. It's my most watched YouTube to date. So happy jumping, and I would love to hear how you like it. Wayne, can I just ask you, I think people would be really interested to hear what low-grade depression feels like, particularly for a man, because it's different, right? Could you flesh that out a little bit? What does
Yeah,
it feel like?
that's a great question. I didn't have the same. I just felt like everything I was sort of starting, first of all, was kind of meaningless.
Mm,
I'd lost some of my direction and basic momentum. I was feeling a sort of a kind of a lack of hope. I didn't have any
mm,
dreams in front of me at the time. A
okay.
lot of the things things I'd experienced, as I shared, in terms of my identity being, that my body healed easily, that I could run in the mountains, that,
You were a superstar.
and all of a sudden I wasn't. And it came upon me quite quickly. And so there was this feeling of kind of tired of being sort of blasé, but mostly just sort of being rudderless. Um,
Mm,
and like I said, it's a big wake up call when, when, for example, one of the things I talk about in the second act is achieving is a really big part of the second act. And all of a sudden, when you don't have as much to achieve, or you're not achieving at the same level, or you've run out of mountains to climb in terms of things to achieve, it's a sort of a startling moment. And so I
Is this part of this too? Because women will talk about this a lot. And I don't know if this is also part of what you're saying. There's almost an invisibility, like, hey, I was a superstar. Look at me, used to being acknowledged, seen, celebrated. And then maybe people aren't looking your way like
That's a
they used
that's a
to.
yes, I do understand that for women, and I think it's very much the same for men. It may not be about their body and their beauty and their for men it's sort of like they're no longer the star at work.
Mhm.
There's somebody else shining and moving beyond them. Uh,
Mm.
just not being able to keep up. But here's the real catch, and this is, I think, for both men and women, is that has become an identity, and that identity is no longer serving you. So
Okay.
now there's this feeling of tremendous loss and this grieving process that's
Mhm.
never really been identified. We hear it said, grieving the loss of my youth, but
Mhm.
that's a very real phenomena. And it happens,
Mhm.
I believe, for most people as a sort of a low grade kind of grief, because
Okay.
people don't rate it up there with losing a family member,
Or a
you know, or
divorce.
or yes, exactly, something that's acute, or
Mm.
where I've truly become a victim of something. So it's sort of brushed to the side, and because it's not seen for how critical it is to be able to step forward into the next 30 or 40 years of your life with the kind of vitality you approached entering the workplace or getting married and having children. All of
Mm,
a sudden most people hit their 60s, and they're not filled with this passionate concept about what the next 30 or 40 years can be. I mean,
mm,
that's just not on
mm.
the table. And the few role models that we have for it, for example, we have some weird role models, like the cover of Art magazine 6 months ago had Tom Cruise on the cover, and it said, Tom Cruise, 57, he still does his own stunts. And so
Mhm.
basically, he's being measured by a second act operating system. And so what happens for a lot of people, they get older, it's like, she's 80 and she's run her third marathon. Well, that's
So it's the
nice.
super agers, but how many that's the 1%.
Exactly. And and I believe we get a different level of soul food in our third act than we do in our second act. The second act soul food, or the food we are fed, is acknowledgement, is success, is getting a raise at work, is our children succeeding in school and getting into a good college. A lot of it is about achievement and basic success by the standards that society lays out there, and those same standards, there are none of them for the third act. So we have the Tom Cruises and those people that make the transition still being successfully competing as
Mm-hmm.
second act people in a third act body, let's say. And then we have other people, and I love the examples of Jimmy Carter, who, when he left the presidency, he did far more with Habitat for Humanity, or Clinton with the Clinton Foundation and what he did in Africa. Both of them did arguably a great deal more and created a lot more meaning and value in the world, and were really truly expressing the best of what the third act is about, which is giving back, being an elder, creating value in the world and for others, taking a lifetime's worth of experience. And this is the biggest challenge for many people, is because in the second act, you go to school, you go to college, you get a certain amount of thing, then you go into the workplace and you start getting work experience. So you got your college degree and you get your work experience, and you just then climb by adding pieces to it. In the third act, I believe the people that are most successful in the third act are people that really look at the life they've lived and say, what skills have I developed? What gifts are
Mm.
truly uniquely mine? What am I passionate about in the world? What speaks to me? I don't know if you're familiar with King Arthur and the search for the Holy Grail. Parsifal is sent off to find the Holy Grail because England has fallen into ruin. And the Grail is called the Cup of Destiny. And, when he finds the Cup of Destiny, he's going out to get it, believing that it's going to lead him to become a knight of the Round Table. So he's doing it purely for the ego reasons of the second act. And the first time he gets to the Grail Cup, he arrives there and he's told, do not reach out for it. Ask
Ah.
the question, what ails thee, humanity? And what he does is he gets there and there's women that are topless and food on trays and trays of food and dancing and stuff like that. And he reaches out and grabs the cup and everything disappears. And then he spends 7 more years in starvation, ruin. The,
Huh.
the land has fallen apart, and and King Arthur is dying. So he goes back again, and this time he humbly asks. So he's told that the way to achieve the Cup of Destiny, which basically means fulfilling your own personal destiny, is to get to the Grail Castle and ask the question, what ails thee, humanity? How
Mm.
may I be of service?
How
And
may
I
I be
believe,
of
yes,
service?
and I believe that is the initiating point of a truly meaningful and extraordinary third act, is to get to that place where you say,
Mhm.
how can I take a lifetime's worth of experience and
Mhm.
create something above and beyond anything I prepared for it? And so there's got to be an element of higher power or magic or God
Ah,
or
spirit.
karma at work there, spirit at work, exactly, that's now
Mm.
informing. Now you're partnered with it. And so, as I said, the first act is dependence, the second act is independence, and the third act is interdependence. And
Mhm.
I believe that we're at a point in the history of humanity. So, finally, let me say, there's never been a third act before. This is a completely new phenomenon.
Yes.
It's only, we forget that before 1950, there was really no such thing as psychology. There was no such thing as nutrition. There was no such thing as exercise, um, holistic health. All of these things, these are modern phenomena.
Mhm.
And we are all the progenitors and the recipients of that. And that's what's brought us to this place where we can actually have a third act, where we can get to a place where we've lived a life full enough, create accrued enough experiences, and hopefully had enough time to digest those experiences so they turned into a degree of wisdom and
I
got to the
see. Yeah.
and then got to the place where we responded to a need in the world. So, for example, with Carter, he saw that, wow, there's a lot of homeless people on the planet, and Clinton saw that there was, that they weren't getting water, and malaria was a big issue in Africa, and they took their unique gifts to um, to play in those arenas, and made an enormous contribution. And
Hey there, Zesties! Well, as some of you know, in addition to being a podcaster, well, I'm many things, but I'm also an avid thrifter of high quality garments made from natural fibers. And boy, do I have fun rescuing cashmere sweaters. I just learned this, so you may not know that vintage is anything over 20 years old. So it's really fun when I find something vintage. It's usually really well made, quite different than what companies are producing now. But I have this dilemma, and that is I can't possibly wear all the items I thrift. So I have opened an eBay store, and I think you might want to check it out. Everything on there is high quality, it's vetted by me, and I think you might appreciate the style. You can check it out. Just go onto eBay and go into Nicole's Garden 61, and that's going to bring you to my offerings. I hope you really enjoy looking at what I've thrifted. And if you're interested in this, I just did an episode called Thrifting for Mental Health that you can listen to for even more fun. So if you have any questions, reach out. But in the meantime, enjoy my thrifted treasures. So what's
well,
the bridge here? So we're going from, this is so interesting. I love these conversations. But so I'm thinking about what you're saying in this tough transition between second and third act. And it seems to me that before we're able to really do what you're talking about, asking ourselves, what would be the soul food for the third act? What's the value or meaning? We have to have a level of acceptance, and that might be uh, complicated and difficult to really let go of. I am no longer in the second act.
yeah, it's
How do you, can you talk a little bit about how people might kind of have some peace and come to terms with the fact that, yes, it's a loss and I'm never going to be able to go back there?
well, it is the critical issue, and it's like I said, it's what drove me to therapy, and what began to sort of help me make that transition. So first of all, I'd like to say that um, if I went back to the Grail analogy, King Arthur and the Grail, there's something that happened when Parsifal was in the Grail castle the first time, and he failed and reached out for the cup instead of asked the question. He
Mm-hmm.
was heartbroken. He was shattered. And it was in the shattering that he became humbled, that he became willing, that he became accepting, and that something new could come in. So I believe for most of us, the very thing that happens naturally that we see as problematic, my body doesn't function as well anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with cancer. My kids have gone, and I don't know who I am. I'm on a financial. I'm not earning at the same level. Um, those kinds of issues, they're that there's a shattering that happens there,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean that in necessarily a painful way, but any form of letting go for most of us is pretty challenging and pretty uncomfortable. So in almost all growth, there's always some discomfort first. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you get around it other than you begin to feel it, and you begin to recognize that, wait a second, I'm not the same person. I can't live by the same operating code. I can't live in achievement because I can't keep up. I can't accumulate at the same level because I'm just not. This body doesn't function the same way. What can I do that's positive in that regard? I coach a lot of people through this transition. It's sort of become a specialty of mine because I see how challenging that is. And it's really about shifting the focus to who I am now. What
Mhm.
is good about this? What have I accumulated?
So putting the light on the possibilities, not on,
Exactly.
this is a silly example, but you're talking about it's obvious, you're kind of hit over the head with it. And I'm an avid tennis player and I'm 63 now, and playing singles is my favorite thing to do, but man, do I pay for it. I mean, you talked about knees, you talked about, and I don't know how much, longer that's going to happen, but you get to the point where, like, when you're hobbling around, it's undeniable. You just can't pretend anymore that your body is what it was.
And here's the catch to that. Pretending is called the recipe for suffering. So
Mm.
as soon as you're willing to give up suffering and to acknowledge it's different. So what do a
Mhm.
lot of people do? They go from playing tennis to playing pickleball because you don't have to run
Mhm.
as much.
That's
You know,
true.
I was a mountain runner. I mountain ran sometimes 3,000 feet in altitude a day. That's a
Mm.
lot. I'd go 7 to 15 miles in the mountains on trails. Well, I can't mountain run anymore, but you know what? I can hike. And here's the
Mhm.
deal. This is a really good example, as is the pickleball and tennis example. Pickleball, people that play pickleball tend to be more communal.
Yes.
They tend, all of a sudden,
Not
there's
as
sort of a,
snobby.
no, exactly. And so all of a sudden, because one of the things that happens when you get older is friends start moving or dying or leaving, or you left your job, and all of a sudden so that's a side thing. So, for example, I can't run anymore. I always ran pretty much alone, but I can go hiking, and if I go hiking with a friend, so now not only so, and I'm a big believer. So anyway, so hiking, I'm in nature. I'm getting
Mhm.
oxygen. I can do it with
Mhm.
a friend. It's
Mhm.
social. I'm
Yeah.
killing more birds with one stone than just doing something. But giving it up, all of a sudden, I'm not giving up the mountains. I'm just giving up the identity of me being a runner.
Yes. Oh,
And all of a sudden,
yes.
and the truth is, and this was an important thing for me to recognize. As much as I loved running, it was never enjoyable or pleasurable. It was always hard. It was always painful. That's running. I'm not saying everything is, but mountain running is, and a lot of the things that we call joys and pleasures are things that the challenge of them is not particularly pleasurable. That's not
Mhm.
true of everything, but
Right.
the point is that so I give up being a corporate, shark, or I give up being a tennis, person that plays singles, and I either play doubles or whatever it
Yes.
is, or go to pickleball or go to table tennis, whatever it is. I just met a group of people that every Sunday they get together and do table tennis.
So
Well,
good for you.
and the byproduct, a lot of laughter, a lot
Yes.
of fun.
Yep.
That's laughter and fun aren't necessarily part of singles tennis. It's
That
pretty
is
competitive.
true.
It's it can be a bloodletting. So a big part of this whole thing is like going, wait a second, I'm not giving something up. I'm trading
Yep.
for something else. And the value of it is, even though I may not be able to get the pleasure I got from the other thing, there may
Yeah.
be added pleasures here. And the
Mhm.
main benefit is I'm not generating suffering.
You know what it reminds me of is one of the general definitions, and I'm sure you know this, for mental health is how flexible you are.
Yes,
Right? And I think you're really shining the light on how important it is to be able to acknowledge the loss and engage the next thing, the new thing, and sort of get over the ego bruise, right,
right.
of not being able to play singles anymore. So it is, and you said this before, like it's an adjustment, and it it's it can feel really painful. It can feel like a death almost,
It
like
is. It is.
yeah.
It's the death of an identity.
Okay.
And here's the hard part. You spent 40 years in that identity and you said, I'm a lawyer. I'm a
Yes.
mother. I am a homemaker. I am a, a, a whatever, we built
Mhm,
this entire identity and all of those things are I
mhm,
am. And all of a sudden, I'm not any of those things anymore. And
mhm.
sometimes it could be I'm not any of those things.
Yeah.
One of the chapters in my book's called It's Not Negotiable.
Mhm.
And a simple idea of it is, when you're 20, you want to stay up all night and then go to work, or stay up 2, 3 nights in a row and then go do a presentation
Mhm.
at your ad agency to win a marketing campaign. No problem. You know, you want to eat French fries every day or wheat if you have a gluten intolerance. You can get away with all of that stuff. When you're older, there's very little that's negotiable. So, for example,
Mhm.
I only need 6 hours of sleep, but if I don't get them before 10 o'clock at night, 8 or 9 won't do it for me.
Interesting.
And I believe that almost everything falls into those windows when you get older. And so one of the upsides of getting older, and I talk about this in the book, is that it actually now gives you a feedback loop on becoming more mindful and more conscious. You never really have it when you're younger. You can get away with everything. So there's no real accountability. You're not getting accountable to the body. You're not getting accountable at work because
Mhm.
you can pull that stuff off. When you're older, everything has a price of admission,
I
you know
see. Yeah.
and if you want to become more conscious, you pay attention to the price of admission. You
Mhm.
become, as you said, flexible, or one of the really popular terms I think for this, in terms, especially in terms of aging, is the ability to be resilient, which is to
Mhm.
both let go, adapt, and then take on a new identity,
Mhm.
a new way of approaching something. And the people that make a relatively painless transition into their third act are the people that have that kind of resiliency and that kind of
Yeah,
willingness to say,
flexibility, yeah.
"Yep, it's not working anymore.
Yeah, so
Who
what
who
so
am
now
I
what?
now? Yes,
Yeah.
who am I now? What
Mhm.
do I want?" Here's a big question. Many people, you ask them what they want, what they love. Most people don't even remember what they love anymore. Well, I used to, when I was a kid, I loved to do this. Yeah, but a lot of things. So, what do I want now? What do I love to do
Mhm.
now? And so, a lot of this is truly no different than being a child. You got to reinvent yourself by asking yourself, putting yourself in new situations. I mean, curiosity and being an explorer and being adventurous, these are qualities that have been drummed out of most of us with 30 years in the same job, or being a parent
Mhm.
raising children every day.
Mhm,
And all
mhm.
of a sudden now we're asked to reinstill that. And if not, go to your Barco lounger
With your Doritos.
with your Doritos and your remote control,
Yeah,
right?
and your Diet Coke, yeah.
That was the idea of retirement. And really what we're getting, and one of the terms that, there's a lot of terms for it, but it's really about recreating ourselves, reinventing
Mm.
ourselves,
Mhm.
redefining who we are, rediscovering what matters to us. So this idea, I call it the re-years.
Mhm.
What are these, what is it that's unique about me today? Who do I
Oh,
want to be
wow.
moving forward?
Mhm. It's really there's a part about this that I think is really exciting in that I used to do a lot of, knitting and different crafting and stuff, and I don't know what's going on, but I kinda wanna do different stuff now. I mean, I kind how many, sweaters do you need or do people want for holidays? And it is it's kind it there's a funness about like, okay, well, I did that. I got pretty competent at it. And now what? And what might be fun now? And I think that that's that open kind of exploring you're describing where you get to there's so many things to try and they don't have to be like hot air balloon trip in France, right?
Right.
They can be
Right.
like, let me see if I can learn how to cook Thai food, or let me see if I can walk another route or what. It doesn't have to be super fancy, but it could be, let me try to do this kind of gardening I've never done. And I think that really keeps us, as you use the word vibrant, but there's a freshness about that.
Yeah. And it's
Mm,
essential. It's essential
mm,
because the truth is, I've never been here before. I've never been this age before.
uh,
I've never been in this body before. I've never lived in this time in history before. I've never been confronted with the issues that I'm passionate about and the things that I have strong feelings about and the interests I have. I've never been here before. And it's the first time in your life we actually have the time to actually indulge them since you were a child. Where you
mhm,
as opposed to being terrified by there being nothing out there, or being overwhelmed by stuff that's out there, or feeling hopeless because everything's you've worn everything out or everything's run its course. Instead, it's like, wait a second, I'm on the beginning of an extraordinary adventure. So the thing that pulled me out of that low grade depression was, all of a sudden 10 years ago, so in 12 11 years ago, I met the dean of the school of gerontology, USC, the top gerontology school in the world. I met the president of AARP, and I
mhm.
met a woman, Kathy Smith, who was the fitness guru for the baby boomers. She invented exercise videos before Jane Fonda. And
Well,
I met them all in one weekend, and they all became literally best friends. I'm
mhm,
I've gone to Mexico with Kathy. I teach private classes in meditation and yoga with the dean of the school, and the president of ARP and I do meditation online together, and we hang out regularly. So I met all of those in one 10-day period, and a year later, two women that I speak to once a week, I have sort of this action group I've been doing. They said to me, you're the youngest 60-year-old I know, and you're always doing new stuff. You should write a book on it. And
mhm,
I'd never thought of that before. So the universe set me up meeting the three of the top people in the
mm,
world in the field
mhm,
of aging, and whispered to me that I should write a book on it. And all of a sudden, I had a purpose again. And here I am with this gerontological psychologist. And I said, I came to you for depression, but depression wasn't my problem. My problem was that I was incapable of making the transition from my second to my third act. And
mhm,
because I was stuck in a state of hopelessness, in a state where I didn't really have a vision what the future could or would look like, where I didn't really know what I wanted anymore because I'd played out everything I'd done, where I was in a temporary place of ennui and loss
mhm,
and confusion and chaos because everything I had defined myself as was no longer applicable or valuable at the same level. I had to stop and question. And I made it through it, and I made it through it with the help of other things than the psychologist. I mean, he helped me a little bit, but the primary thing was sort of finding my way, as we do
mhm,
between our first act and our second act. I happen to have been lucky, and all of a sudden I'm writing this book, and it's like, oh my God, I'm writing a chapter on diet. I fasted for 40 days when I was a kid. I've done every diet on the planet. You know, I, you know, I wrote a chapter on meditation. I've been doing meditation for 40 years.
mhm,
All of a sudden, all the pieces of who I were had a place to express themselves. And so, as you said, not only do we have to have daily, I have a chapter in the book called "No Purpose, No Plan, No Project, No Life." Like every day you have to have a little project. You have to have
mhm,
something that keeps you motivated. It's easy when you wake up, drink your coffee, get in your car, sit in traffic, and go to work, and then fight the good fight. But all of a sudden that's gone. Well, what are you going to choose to do? So
mhm,
like you said, garden in a different way, or walk a different route, or go to the museum and see, or indulge in something you liked 30 years ago and see if maybe you've got some passion for it. And so I believe you have to have, small plans, a little bit bigger projects, and a little bit bigger purpose. And I
mhm.
think if you've got all three of those things going for you every day, that's called a really good life. Doesn't matter what age you are, but it's the first time in life when you get to your third act where you can choose all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
You've never really had the freedom to do that prior to this, and nor did you have enough experience with life and enough knowledge, enough wisdom, enough education, having had this extraordinary variety of experiences that you can bring to bear on something. And as I pointed out, with myself, all of a sudden, every single thing I've explored in my life, but not only that, all of a sudden I'm writing chapters about things like, oh my God, you leave work and the 200 people you see at work every day that weren't really friends, but they were part of your world and part of your community, all of a sudden you don't have a community. And you wonder why you're lonely when you didn't really, maybe one friend died or one couple moved away. But all of a sudden there's 200 people less in your life. And so inadvertently, you find yourself in this completely new world, and you didn't even see it happen. You didn't watch
Yeah.
your body. You didn't watch your body start to fail you. You didn't. Yes, there were noticeable moments, but the byproducts of those moments we become the victim of if we don't identify them and then act appropriately. By all of a sudden, for example, I swim. There's people at my pool I see every day. So I'm part of a new community. I happen to be in the 12-step world. I see people in there all the time. I do a lot of things to build community back up because I'm basically I'm a writer. I like to isolate, and if I do that in my 70s, that's a recipe for depression.
Yep. Yep. You're talking about being really intentional and using
Yes.
this as a blank slate.
And an invitation, even
Mhm.
more than a blank slate, saying, hey, you've got chance now to say, what do I want? Who do I
Mhm.
want to be? What battles do I want to fight? Where do I want to give back? Where are my skills necessary? Where can I create value? These are really big questions. And
Mhm.
we've never really had the freedom to ask them before because we were busy earning a living. We
And
were
we didn't
busy.
live as long.
No, exactly.
So, Wayne, where can people find out more about you? There's so much goodness here, and I can hear the excitement in your voice. Where can they find out more about your work and your offerings?
Well, my website is, I have two websites, waynelair.com, and
Mhm.
they can go there and see what, see what I'm about now. I'm doing, I'll start be doing retreats and workshops in making this transition and helping people find their way into, a meaningful third act. And, I do coaching there as well. My book will be coming out, probably the first week in December, and it's called The
Mhm.
Art of Conscious Aging, uh, a guide to happiness, health, and purpose in life's third act. And I also wrote a previous book on finding your life's purpose. So it's called The Prodigy Within: The Quest to Discover Your Life's Purpose for Baby Boomers and Other Seekers. And it's really about finding your life's purpose in later life.
Mhm.
Part of that has to do with this sort of metaphor I shared about uh, Parsifal and the search for the Grail, which is it's really not till we're a lot older that we've accrued enough experience and education and all the things I talked about to really to really have a purpose that we want to give back. So,
Mhm.
in that book, I help people discover their purpose. So, yeah, so they can go to my website, either theprodigywithin.com or
Mhm.
um,
Okay.
my primary website now, waynelair.com. And, and check it out. And if you do go sign up, give me your email address so I can let you know when the book's
Mhm.
coming out. And the book also, I have a workbook that comes out with it as well, the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves to help make this transition. And I just don't think it's so. You asked me early on what was distinctive about my book, besides sort of being an operating manual, like for example, you can't eat the same. Well, what's the really important things? Is it the Mediterranean diet or
Mhm.
vegetarianism or veganism? No, I've sort of boiled it down to basically, for me, it's pretty simple at this point. Does it support your immune system? Does it undermine your immune system? Does
Mm-hmm.
it does it is it the primary thing to know
Yeah.
when you get older is it are
Yeah.
the foods you eating inflammatory?
Inflammatory. Yep.
And any food that's inflammatory is going to cause a problem when you're older. You can get away with inflammatory food. So the primary thing you need to know about diet is what's inflammatory and what isn't. That's
Yes.
pretty simple. So each one of my chapters is sort of that level of simple. You can then go do the work and decide, because you can be a vegan and not eat inflammatory food, and you can be a meat eater and limit your inflammatory food. And same thing
Mhm.
with meditation. You don't have to sit for 20 minutes a day. You can do a walking meditation. You can do guided meditation. So in
Mm.
every chapter, I give examples of people that have sort of mastered the skill of that chapter. And I also talk about a really simple way to question ourselves to come to something that works for us. So it's not
Love that.
it's not a didactic, you've got to do it this way. It's more
Mhm.
like, how can you work within the parameters of, for example, inflammatory food bothers everybody that's in their 70s. You cannot get away with it. So how do I work with that within the diet of what makes sense to me? So uh,
Again, the flexibility. We're
yeah,
back to yeah. It
and the
has been
mindfulness.
oh, and the mindfulness. It has been so fun and so energizing talking with you today, and I'm really grateful that you came on and shared your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Well, I love your vibrancy and your curiosity. You've got all of the requisite talents, and you know I can see that you've created your perfect venue for stepping into your third act.
Aw.
You were made to do podcasting.
Oh, thank you so much. Sometimes it all comes together, and it's hard to describe. When you talk to people who aren't podcasting, I like my tennis people, my doubles people. They're interested to a point. They don't, but I will. I love to go on and on. It's like having your child, right? It's like, oh, and then this, and then that, and so. Anyway, appreciate that. Thank you again, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. Our theme song is All I Did Was Wait for You by Kjartan Abel. Visit Kjartan-Abel, that's KJARTAN-Abel, ABEL.com to hear more of Kjartan's work. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest. See you then.